I'm going to talk about our practice. That's no surprise because I always talk about our practice. So it's not an easy matter to quiet your mind and find inner peace. Even during Zazen or a session like this, your mind is often active, jumping from one thought to another. Your body might be uncomfortable. You're worrying about all kinds of unresolved problems in your life, trying to sit still, trying to quiet the mind, trying to find peace. Seems like almost an impossible task sometimes. For many years, I've had occasion to give Zazen instruction to quite a few people in very many different settings, ranging from Zen centers to high schools, to colleges, universities, and prisons, and centers all around our country and in other countries. And the one thing that I've noticed is that our practice on the cushion is not so different from the way we function in our everyday life. I remember on one occasion, I was teaching a class about how to count the breath from 1 to 10. And there was a woman in the class who told me she was having a hard time because when she was counting 2, she was always thinking about 3 and 4. And when she was counting 3, she was always thinking about 4 and 5. And I asked her, in your life, are you always over planning everything? Are you going to do that in order to make sure that you and everything is secure and safe? She says, yeah, that's me. Somebody else in the class was complaining when doing Zazen that they're always falling asleep, always spacing out, not particularly thinking about anything, but they were just not present. So again, I asked them, in your life, when you're in uncomfortable situations, such as talking to someone you don't like, or you don't like what they're saying, and somehow you feel uncomfortable with them, do you just sort of create your own reality, retreat into the depths of your fictitious mind, so that it's almost as if the other person was not there at all? Yes, that's me. So it isn't as though Zazen is bringing up something that doesn't exist in our everyday life. It's just that we have an opportunity to look at it during Zazen. There's an expression I've heard and that I've shared many times, that a snake doesn't know its shape until you put it in a bamboo tube. In a bamboo tube, it bangs up against the sides. When it's out in the open, it has no idea that it's curvy. Maybe a snake doesn't know whether it's curvy or not in a bamboo tube, but at least it knows there's something constraining it. It's like when we do Zazen, we confine our body to a cushion. We try to control our mind. And this 3 foot by 3 foot square cushion is like our bamboo tube around our body and our mind. We bang up against ourselves. We become more aware how our mind functions, how our body functions. And if we grow sleepy, it doesn't necessarily mean we're tired. It could mean we're tired, but also means we're trying to we find the whole situation too uncomfortable to just be present with it. So we try to blank it out, avoid it. Not only when we're doing Zazen, but when anything uncomfortable comes up in our life, we just try to avoid it and go unconscious. If our active mind tries to figure everything out while we're sitting, that's the same way we approach life. If we're fidgeting and always uncomfortable and can't sit still, I wouldn't be surprised if sitting at home, you're the type of person who gets up every 15 or 20 minutes to see what's in the refrigerator, or to go to the bathroom, or to look out the window. Whatever it takes to avoid just being present in this present moment. Thinking, moving, clearing your throat, whatever it is, adjusting your glasses, avoiding the feelings in the present moment. One of the powers of Zazen is to bring us into this moment with no distractions. Just sit with ourselves face to face. Allow ourselves to experience our discomfort, our agitation, our busy, active mind, our confusion, and be able to sit with it, experience it, recognize it. That gives us the potential of the opportunity to deal with it. When it's so hidden, there's no way we can take care of it at all. We're just controlled by it, run by it. Zen Master Dogen wrote a chapter called Fukanzazengi, which is translated as the universal promotion of the principles of Zazen. And it's translated as him saying that the way is basically perfect and all-pervading. How could it be contingent upon practice and realization? The Dharma wheel is free and untrammeled. What need is there for one's concentrated effort? Indeed, the whole body is far from the world's dust. Who could believe in a means to brush it clean? It is never apart from one right where one is. So Dogen's saying that everything is perfect as it is, but what's the use of going off here and there to practice? I hope by the end of the talk, I will have answered this question. In my teacher's comments on this translation, he said that there's a few words, a few introductory words that are sometimes taken as a formality that aren't translated. And he said most English translations of Fukanzazengi leave off these few words at the beginning. And he said they mean after exhaustively searching. So the first sentence should say, after exhaustively searching, one realized that the way is basically perfect and all-pervading. This after exhaustively searching is a key point. There's no easy way. It would be nice if we could just take a pill and all of our difficulties and troubles go away. In fact, I know people who live by trying to do that. Taking pills in the morning in order to get through the day, and then taking pills at night in order to be able to go to sleep. But by putting our energy and our attention to our Zazen, we can realize that the way is basically perfect and all-pervading. And through that, we can realize peace and freedom. That's what nirvana is. Literally, nirvana means to extinguish conflict or to extinguish opposites. What kind of conflict are we talking about? In the next sentence, Dogen Zenji says, and yet, if there is the slightest discrepancy, the way is as distant as heaven from earth. If the least like or dislike arises, the mind is lost in confusion. So nirvana, we could say, is to extinguish the conflict created by our dualistic mind. All of the dichotomies that we create out of our mind, separating ourselves, not only from ourselves, but from others. We have so many ideas of what reality is and what it should be, what we want it to be, that it replaces things as they are. Our very life as it is, which is the way, which is perfect and all-pervading. When we do Zazen, we don't try to quiet the mind. We bring our attention to our breathing, our attention to our koan. We bring our attention to just sitting, whatever our practice is. When the mind starts to become active, just return your attention to your breathing. You don't have to worry about thoughts, they'll take care of themselves. One way of looking at it is if we push the thoughts away, it's just the flip side of grabbing onto the thoughts. It's another thought. So rather than trying to push thoughts away, just return your mind very gently, but very firmly to counting your breath. Even if you have to do it over and over and over and over again, doesn't matter. The point is to learn how to live in each moment, how to be totally absorbed in each moment and absorbed by each moment, so there's no separation. Concentrating our mind on our breathing, focusing our attention on each moment, little by little, the mind settles down and the body settles down. Inside, we become more purified, clearer. And that being so, how do we function in our everyday life, in the Zendo, or in whatever we're doing? Again, it's not a matter of our concentration, of our attentiveness during Zazen being different from how we function in our everyday life. We have to be mindful in our everyday life and our activity. These session are set up so you don't have to think about what to do and when to do it. Of course, when you first come to session, everything is somewhat new to you and it takes time to learn the routine. But once you learn the routine, everything is taken care of. All you have to do is follow the schedule, sit, follow the guidelines. There'll be no problems. How do we do it? I know we've modified a number of things from the way that Dogen taught the monks in Japan. But being trained, we learn how to position our zafus, how to stand up, how to sit down. I remember one time when I was doing session in Mexico, we taught the people how to use the orioki bowls during the meals. And one of the men came up to me after session, and he was delighted at that way of eating, how delicate it was, how precise it was, how efficient it was. And he was reflecting on how we were doing it, and he said, "We must look like barbarians to Maizumi Roshi, the way we eat." Maybe we do. But it's not just the way we eat, it's the way we walk, the way we carry ourselves, the way we carry things. So we're usually so unconscious about that. You know, these Soto robes that I'm wearing in the movie in corner have these long sleeves. If we walk into the Zendo swinging our arms like this, the sleeves brush on the ground and somebody will step on them and they'll trip. So in the Zendo, we always walk with our hands, shashu. And when we walk around the Zen Center too, I'm wearing our robes. It helps us be mindful. So if we're mindful of how we function, our actions are not only reinforced, but it reinforces our internal state too. And as our internal state becomes clearer, it manifests again in our external activities. So it's like a feedback loop. So by being aware of both, how we sit on the cushion, how we function, how we act, together our actions and our internal state will become more and more unified. And the conflict between the two will gradually be extinguished. That's peace and freedom. Further on in Fukanzazengi, Dogen gives some instructions on how to sit. And he said, for Zazen, a quiet room is suitable. Eat and drink moderately. Cast aside all involvements and cease all affairs. Do not think good or bad. Do not administer pros and cons. Cease all the movements of the conscious mind, the gauging of all thoughts and views. Have no designs on becoming Buddha. Zazen has nothing whatsoever to do with sitting and lying down. So he said, do not think good or bad. You might say that's impossible. I don't think it's impossible, but because we're so habituated, so accustomed to think good and bad, it may be difficult at first to let it go. Our judging mind can arise almost instantaneously. That's the one thing that's faster than the speed of light, is the judging mind. So what is good and bad? We don't even know if we examine it carefully. It depends on circumstances. Something may be very positive and beneficial in one circumstances, but it may be negative and destructive in another. If we believe in something positive, and all it does is reinforce our position and our ego, it could become something very negative. Dogen says, don't administer pros and cons. Again, all kinds of judgments and evaluations arise. Have no design on becoming a Buddha, the awakened one. As soon as we have an idea of what it means to be awakened, it becomes something else. The idea is not what it is. We have all kinds of desires. In another writing, Dogen said, having few desires means not looking around. Looking around for something better. This can't be it, it's got to be somewhere else. So during session, we ask you not to look around, desiring all kinds of things other than our own practice, other than quieting our own mind, comparing and judging ourselves against others. What they're doing, how they look, and then most importantly, how do I look to them? Do I look like I'm in deep concentration? So what prevents us from being in concentration during Zazen? It's all of our preconditioned ideas and attitudes. All of our attitudes are based on our ideas and beliefs, both hidden and obvious. If when you're sitting and the noise of the automobiles irritates you, you find you can't concentrate because of the noise, look and see what your idea of ideal sitting is. So Dogen said it's best to sit in a quiet place, but sometimes we can't do that. I've talked many times about the Zen Center of Los Angeles, right in the middle of the area called Koreatown. During Shishin, I can't tell you how many times I heard gunshots. I can tell you how many times I heard squealing of car tires and then the sound of metal crunching metal. We all just sat there, but the thought that was in everybody's mind was, I sure hope that wasn't my car. And then what about the police helicopters hovering overhead? If you can meditate through that, you can meditate through just about anything. So we have this idea of how we want our practice to be. I want to be able to sit for the whole week without a single pain in my leg. Well, I've been sitting for over 50 years. You know, I can't sit on the floor anymore now because of arthritis in my hips. Doesn't allow me to do it. But I can tell you, I never sat a session without some pain. It would be nice, but that's not the reality. I like to fly too. But it's all a fantasy. It isn't so. It reminds me of the young girl some time ago in a more formal setting. She had two suitors. And one of them was very handsome, but he came from a family that was not very rich. And the other was not very good looking, but he came from a rich family. And the girl kept procrastinating on making a choice. They both wanted to marry her. And her mother kept nagging the girl, you can't leave them like this, you have to decide. And the girl was kind of shy and she wouldn't say anything. So her mother said, okay, you go into the other room. If you want to marry Mr. A, you move your blouse off of your right shoulder and bare your right shoulder. If you want to marry Mr. B, you pull the blouse off of your left shoulder and bare your left shoulder. And I'll give you a few minutes and then I'll come in and see you. And she goes in a few minutes later and there's a girl sitting there with two bare shoulders. Can't decide. Wanted something that didn't exist. Isn't it so? Dogen said, once you adjust your posture, take a deep breath, inhale and exhale, rock your body right to left, and settle into a steady, immobile sitting position. Then think of not thinking. How do you think of not thinking? Non-thinking. This in itself is the essential art of Zazen. I want you to know I puzzled over that thinking, not thinking for a long time. How do you think non-thinking? So there's another translation that says, leave thinking as it is, instead of thinking, non-thinking. Leave thinking as it is, and that's what I said earlier. Thoughts will take care of themselves. You don't have to worry about them. I was talking to some of the residents here about when we got Sky, our big horse, our big gelding. We had Naga, our mare, before him, and she was out in the field, and the neighbor has a gelding who Naga and the neighbor horse would kind of touch noses across the fence. And as soon as we got Sky, put him in the same field with Naga, he ran over and started, well, biting and kicking the other gelding and acting very aggressively for him, trying to show him that he was the boss of this terrain. And, you know, I'm fairly new to horses at that time and didn't know what to do. And our neighbor, who is Amish, grew up in an Amish community, and all he knew horses. He said what he usually does when he puts a new horse in the field is he goes to town and lets them work it out. And then he comes back and everything is settled. It's like our thoughts. You don't have to control them. Let them work it out themselves. You concentrate on your breathing or whatever your practice is. Yeah. Thinking of not thinking is the way, one way to look at maintaining the mind in each moment. If we can do that, there's no, you know, no space, no room, and no time for being upset, being worried, being angry. There's just this breath and this breath. The mind will settle into a state of rest and not grasp. If we experience life, if we can experience life, each situation and the people without this tension of attachment or aversion, that's how we can eliminate conflict. That's nirvana. If you have a sloppy posture, concentration will be sloppy as well. We can let the body sit alert, yet at the same time comfortable. The mind will be alert and comfortable. It applies to all kinds of things. We're sloppy about how we dress. It's a reflection of a sloppy mind. It's not just a hollow exercise. Taking care to follow the rules or regulation of Shishin and to carry them out in our life is how we eliminate conflict, eliminate opposites. So taking care of the internal state, the external state will also be taken care of. In Fukanzazengi, Dogen also wrote, the Zazen I speak of is not step-by-step learning Zen, it's simply the Dharma gate of comfort and ease. It is a culmination of totally realized enlightenment. It is a manifestation of ultimate reality. Traps and snares can never interfere with it. If you attain this, you're like a dragon who has reached the water, or a tiger who reclines on a mountain. The true Dharma then appears of itself, and you will be free of dullness and distraction. So although each moment we bring our mind back to our breath, and it seems like it's step by step by step, but it's a culmination of realizing this exhaustive search. It's interesting, though, that when Dogen was a young man, a young monk, he didn't have this comfort and ease that he's talking about. And he was compelled by a question that drove his practice and his quest. And he asked, if everyone is endowed with Buddha nature, why did Buddha and the ancient Zen masters exert themselves to such a great extent in order to accept what was already true? So, said everybody has a Buddha nature, or everybody is endowed with Buddha nature. So why do we have to work so hard just to reveal it? And in Fukanzazengi, he kind of answers that question. He says, all people throughout the world are without doubt equally imprinted with Buddha nature. However, without the practice of Zazen, the true nature and function of a person will not be manifested. You should therefore devote yourself exclusively to and be completely absorbed in the practice of Zazen. Although it is said that there are as many minds as there are people, all people should practice the way, which is nothing other than the study of the self. There's no reason to forsake the place you sit at home and go aimlessly off to the dusty regions of other countries. If you make one false step, you stray from the way that lies directly before you. Without the practice of Zazen, we won't manifest this Buddha nature. So devote yourself exclusively to it. Of course, he's talking to the monks in a monastery. What else do they have to do? Well, they have to maintain the monastery, just like we have to maintain the abbey. It takes many hands and eyes, both before session, during, and after session, to maintain this place. Especially want to shout out to Roshi Shinko, who told me that she's retiring as Tenzo. And people working in the kitchen know that that's a wild fabrication, that she did a tremendous amount of work in preparation, not only in the kitchen, but those of you who came from outside and are sleeping here, your rooms were prepared with tender care by Roshi Shinko. So appreciate her effort. But I mentioned that Dogen answers the question, but he doesn't exactly answer the question. He does say that without the practice of Zazen, your true nature will not be manifest. Or we could say that you will not realize it. And you know that Dogen's traveled to China from Japan, and he spent 5 years in China. And then he has the audacity to say there's no need to go aimlessly off to dusty regions of other countries. In other words, and we've heard this before, do as I say, don't do as I do. Then Dogen wrote, the ancient sages were this diligent in their practice. So how can people today dispense with the practice of Zazen? So this is Dogen's answer to the original question, which was, why did the ancient sages have to be so diligent in their practice if they were already endowed with Buddha nature? So it's like an answer to a koan. See, he wrote, the ancient sages were this diligent in their practice, so how can people today dispense with the practice of Zazen? So what kind of answer is that? It's like circular reasoning, isn't it? But it is like a koan. They were diligent because they were diligent. Why did Dogen go to China where he found his true teacher? He went to China because he went to China. What more of an answer do we need? We have an example set by the Buddha and all of the ancient were these, the ancient sages. But don't forget what I quoted earlier from Maezumi Roshi. He said, after exhaustively searching, the way is basically perfect and all pervading. Exhaustively searching. That means to leave no stone unturned. I mean, how many of us say, well, I don't think I want to look under that one. But all of these, I'll look under them. But that one, and I've mentioned this many times before too. Yasutani Roshi, one of Maezumi Roshi's teachers, said that first, when we first start practicing, we see all of the boulders in our mind, all the obstacles. We know how we can deal with them because they're so obvious. But then when we take care of them, there's the rocks, the 6-inch rocks, the 8-inch rocks. And then there's the 2-inch rocks or the 1/2-inch rocks. And then there's the gravel. Finally, I think, oh man, I cleared all the gravel away. And then what's underneath that? Dust. How are we going to take care of the dust? How are we going to exhaustively search? That means we have to uncover every hidden crevice of our mind. See what's lurking there. Like Dogen said in Fukanzazengi and also in Genjo Koan, to study Zen is to study the self. And that's what we're doing. After his awakening, the Buddha said, everyone without exception is endowed with the wisdom and virtue of the Buddha. But due to their attachments and deluded thoughts, they don't realize it. The way is basically perfect and all pervading. The way is universal and complete. But we don't realize it due to our attachments and deluded thoughts. Zazen is a gateway to understanding and dissolving attachments and deluded thoughts. Heed Dogen's words. He said, learn the backward step that turns the light inward to illuminate the self. Body and mind will drop away by themselves, and the essential self will be manifest. Take the step backwards. In other words, slow down. Retreat. Shine the light inward. Surrender to all of your attachments, to all of your control. And look at your deluded thoughts, which are dualistic thoughts. That's what our Zazen is. Illuminate the self, not the small, grasping, whining, complaining self. He says body and mind will drop away by themselves, and the essential self will be manifest. When Dogen was in China, he found his true teacher, Tendo Nyojo. And during Zazen one morning, Tendo Nyojo was correcting, maybe castigating one of the monks in there. And the monk was kind of nodding off or something. And then Nojo said, "Don't waste your time. Drop off body and mind." Matsumi Roshi used to shout that at us so often that I knew the Japanese for it. Shin Shin Datsuraku. That's the way he would say it. Drop off body and mind. What does it mean, drop off body and mind? Our attachment to our ideas of what this body is, what this mind is. And the essential self will be manifest. He says they'll drop away by themselves. So when Dendo Nyojo shouted that Jin Shin Datsuraku, Dogen dropped off body and mind, but the monk who was sitting next to him was still nodding off. Dogen went in to see Tendo Nyojo and he says, and Tendo Nyojo said, why did you come in here? He bowed, and he said, "Why are you bowing?" He said, "Body and mind have dropped off." And he said, "So if that's so, who's this standing before me?" You know what Dogen said? The dropped off body and mind. So we have an expression, because the self is no self, we call it the self. No, it's not what it seems. See, because we try to put everything in a box. What I want you to do is just let go of all of your preconceived notions. It's not complicated. Zazen is not complicated, but it's also not easy. If it were so easy, Shakyamuni Buddha would not have had to sit Zazen for 6 years. And Bodhidharma would not have had to spend 9 years practicing Zazen facing the wall. So here we are in Shishin. We're in the middle of a heat wave. It's uncomfortable. We're sweating. We turned off the cooler so that I could give this talk and you could hear me, but I'm sure you'd rather have the cold air and my muffled voice. But you know, at least we're not being attacked by biting flies. I've had sessions in the country with biting flies. If you think that itch on the side of your nose is driving you crazy and you don't want to move during Zazen, how about if a big fly lands on your neck and starts biting you? You know, the Buddha, Bodhidharma, and all the Zen masters struggled a lot. So, what's the problem? It's a little warm, but please hydrate yourself. The meals are marvelous. Enjoy them. Rest when it's time to rest. Sit when it's time to sit. Eat when it's time to eat. Chant when it's time to chant. And when you chant, just totally listen with your ears. Maizumi Roshi said we chant with our ears. So that becomes one voice. So I encourage you. Session is already half over, so please keep applying yourself to the best you can. Thank you for listening.